Welcome back everyone to Let's Sew Kids. I'm Miss Susan, and in this session we are going to learn how to sew on a button. Whether a button maybe comes off your clothes or you're sewing a project from scratch that features buttons, it's really a skill that you will always use, and it's really easy. So let's get started. You're going to need the following supplies. You need a piece of scrap fabric. I've used a piece of felt here. You need a button. A 4-hole button is the best. If you only have a 2-hole, that's fine, and really as large as you can find because it's just a little easier to work with. A hand sewing needle with a large eye. You need your sewing thread. You need a straight pin or a second needle and a small pair of scissors. Before we begin, I want to show you there are two different types of buttons. One is a flat button and the other one is a shank button. On the shank button, it has a built-in shank. See how that sits up above the fabric? A shank provides a space between the button and the fabric, and so the fabric can move and the button can move independently. A flat button, though, has no shank. There's no shank on there. Without it, the button can't move around when it's in the buttonhole, and then after frequent use, it can tear a hole in the fabric. So the flat button is really the most common of buttons, so we're going to be creating our own shank as we sew the button. So we're going to get ready to sew, and we'll move these things off, and I want to show you, I've marked on my fabric an X. This is going to be where I'm going to sew my button on. You want to go ahead and mark the placement of your button so you get it exactly where you want it. So I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to reel off a length of thread about the length of from the spool to my end of my arm. I'm going to thread my needle. And I want to pull the threads so they're even with each other. And I'm going to kind of lick at my thumb and forefinger, wrap the thread around my finger a couple times, and you're going to get it so you can see it. We're going to roll that off and pull that tight, and now we have our knot. We're going to start by going from back to front. Pull that up all the way. Now you can see the knot on the back. And we're going to place our button, first hole, and bring it all the way down against the fabric. We're going to be sewing basically in a circle. We'll come from the back to the front, around, front to back, around. So think of it as a circle. I'm going to put my thread back in, and I don't want to go tight quite yet, because what I'm going to do with that second needle or your pin, I use the second needle because it's a fairly large button. It gives me a little bit more length. I'm going to hold it in there. I've got it between my thumb and forefinger. Hold it in there with a thread. And I'm going to come up and go back down again. Now you don't have to do this blindly. For sure you can turn it around and see where you've gone in. You want to go in and out pretty much in the same place. Make sure you tighten your thread up. And I'm going to do this 5 times. And the number of times are going to vary. You don't want it too thick and you don't want it too thin. There we go. Okay, here's my 5. Now I'm going to move over on the back. I want to jump over. So I've kind of jumped over here. And we're going to do the same thing with this side. That's 3, 4, and 5. So now we're going to take the needle out, and what that's given us is a space between the button and the fabric. And this is going to be the foundation of our shank. So you can see how there is that space in between the two. You're going to take your needle from the back, you're going to go to the front, but not through the buttonhole. You're going to come up through the fabric right here where your thread is. Pull that all the way through, and you're going to wrap it. I'm going to wrap this one 5 times. Again, it depends on the size of your button. I think that's 4 and 5. And now you're going to put the needle back through between the button and the fabric from front to back. You're going to turn it over. And knot it. So you're going to take a stitch, leave yourself a loop. There we go. So I've got my loop there. I'm going to put my thread through the loop, tighten it up. Now I'm going to do that again. Have a loop. I'm going to put my thread through the loop and tighten it up for my knot. Don't worry if you end up like that. It doesn't matter. It's on the back. And it's a big button, so I'm going to do it one more time. Through the loop and tighten it up. Clip your thread. And you're done. That's really all there is to it. I've got a couple samples here. We've done a side-by-side button, like the purple one. Whoop, there we go. So we've sewn side by side. You could also do it horizontally if you wanted to. Another option is to sew an X, so you're going diagonally across the buttonholes. Just another look. It's up to you. Just to show you again the difference between the shank and no shank, this button, we see it has no shank there. The button is right up against the fabric. And I've sewn a sample buttonhole. So when I button it, there's no room for this to move. So if I'm moving around in the garment, everything is kind of stuck together. And that's where I could run the risk of eventually pulling a hole in the fabric. Also, without that shank, the buttonhole gets distorted a little bit. It kind of sticks out. It's just not a really good look. The other button, on the other hand, has a shank. I don't know if you can see that. With the pink thread, it has the shank. And now those fabrics have the freedom of movement. So it's going to move. It's going to keep it more secure. My buttonhole stays nice and parallel. So that's why you make that shank that we talked about earlier. And that's all there is to it. So you did it. You did a great job. I want to thank you for joining me on Let's Sew Kids. To know when I post new videos, please press the like button and the subscribe below. And if there are any techniques or projects you would like to see in future videos, I want to do what you are looking for in sewing, please put them down in the comments section below. So I want to thank you again for joining me on Let's Sew Kids, and we'll see you next time. Bye.